Good morning and afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our weekly Friday Fast Track Hangout. I'm Wayne Griffenberg. I'm an AE at the Autodesk team for the Fusion and HSM. Today, we're starting our series of essential tips and tricks as we go through HSM as well as Fusion 360. So it's all of our integrated CAD and CAM products. We're going to have an essential tips and tricks over the next few months. These are actually leading up to our Autodesk University classes, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But as we go through, I want to make sure you guys know this is really about a conversation. We do this each week for you guys, and we want to make sure that our community has a voice as well as us. So these presentations aren't just us talking and showing you stuff. It's really a conversation. Anytime you guys have any input, any questions, anything to add, please feel free, especially on this topic with tips and tricks, because I know we have a lot of elite users who are on with us and our power users, as well as new users who come into our webinars each week. So please feel free to ask questions, enter in the chat panel. You can expand out your GoToWebinar view and type the questions right in the questions panel, and we'll get an answer to you. And again, any of you guys who want to add to what the topic we're talking about, please feel free, and we'll make sure that we get your additions in there. So this year, we have Autodesk University 2017, and it's going to be huge this year because we have a lot of classes going on, as well as our workshops, our keynotes and workshops that are happening with a lot of our elite users out there, as well as our power users inside of Autodesk and our developers as well. So it's a great opportunity for you guys to join and learn, as well as have some social networking going on. So as you can meet some of those users, you can talk with Seth Medora, you can talk with Lawrence. He's in our weekly webinars as well, and you can see him in our forums. You can see all these guys in our forums, as well as developers where they're doing classes. So 3 days. The first one, we're going to talk about designing a speaker for your iPhone or for your Droid phone that you can plug in, create the speaker yourself. You're going to design it, a PC board through Fusion using Eagle product. Design an enclosure. We're going to have 3D printing available, as well as machining the base for it. So you have a complete workflow of working inside of Fusion to be able to make whatever it is that you want. You can make anything. And then second day, we have a lot of classes. I see there's classes that are going to be from Seth, from Lawrence, even CJ, I think, is going to do a class towards the end there. And then we have a lot of our other elite users, power users, who are going to be teaching classes on post-processors and getting started. And so it's really worthwhile to join up and be part of those classes. I know Tim Paul's going to be running a few of them. Marty Deans from Autodesk will be there as well. And then the last day is our CAM fundamentals, and we have a little bit more to talk about that. But again, this will give you a preview of what you guys are going to experience when you join Autodesk University. So a product innovation platform to be able to walk all the way through designing the PC board, making the PC board, using Fusion to design and make it your personal enclosure that goes around it that you can 3D print, machining and being able to do some renderings of it and making a finished part that you can walk home with at the end of that class. So we have our certificate series coming from our adoption group. And working with Derek on the first day, we got the CAM fundamentals, or actually that's on the last day, getting the fundamentals, power users like Kevin Lee and Kevin Ellingson, and Angelo Duras. We've seen him join some of our webinars, and he's out at Pier 9, and he, as well as CJ Abraham, are going to be there to help you guys walk through the 3D and the multi-axis milling. So just to get the experience to meet those guys, to work with them, ask questions, pick their brains on machining and in CAM, it's a great opportunity. So I highly recommend joining us at Autodesk University this year. So just to give you an overview, we're going to have John Saunders, Rob Lockwood's going to be there, Lawrence, Seth, and as I had mentioned, we're going to have also Amish is going to be there, Lars Christensen, Tim Paul, Marty Deans. Renee's going to teach a class. He's our software architect. You get to meet him. And, of course, Al Watmo will be in attendance. So, again, not only for social networking, but also learning from these giants, from these CAM and machining Jedi Masters. So as we go on, I'm going to start to jump into our essentials for tips and tricks. This is the first series, or at least the first of a series, to get a lot of those tips that we've done in our past webinars, as well as those quick tips that you see each week, to bring them into one place that you guys can find all that information you need. A lot of those tips that will help you be more productive and to get better at the tools that you're using, and be able to have a place that you can go one-stop shop for all those tips and tricks. So as we start to get into it, as you noticed in the past, we have had a lot of our elite users as well as power users and Autodesk champions do some tips and tricks in the past. And I often go back and look through a lot of these to relearn and remember and know that I'm trying to do something. And I can always go back and look at one of these videos on our YouTube channel and say, oh yeah, that's right, that's how Lars did it. And Rob talked about that in one of his tips and tricks videos. So I always go back, and it's a great place to go to find some of those tips that we've done. And again, we're going to continue that series, and what we're doing here is trying to bring some of those essentials to you in all three of our integrated CAM workspaces to keep that tradition going of tips and tricks. So for today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through some of these essentials. We're going to, oops, I just jumped ahead. We're going to talk about some of those keyboard shortcuts. Now, a lot of users have asked in the past is, where do you find them? Where are they? They're kind of spread all over the place, so I put them together here, and I'm going to walk through some of those keyboard shortcuts with you. Talk a little bit more about expressions and how you can find those variables that you can use inside of those expressions. Talk about setting your defaults and where you can find those defaults after you sent them. So if you, or set them. So if you want to be able to share them with your team, or if you want to be able to go find some of those defaults to put them on another machine, you don't have to restart. I can show you where to find them. Using the compare and edit to set defaults, and also just overview of what that tool does for you. We're going to go over quickly some right-click menus and the way that you can customize some of those menus in each of the interfaces, as well as our talking about our searching and using our menus and toolbox inside of the three different CAD and CAM interfaces. Talk about templates. Where do we work with templates? How do we use them? And how do we use a template to go from one system to another? Or shall I say system, one interface to another as far as integrated CAD and CAM are concerned. And in the end, we're going to talk about a little bit more tips inside of our simulation, CAM simulation, in Fusion as well as Inventor HSM and HSM work. So hopefully some of these essential tips in the beginning will help you get up to speed and for all of our new users and our elite users out there. If you guys can help add on to this webinar where we have a nice overview from your point of view as well, because again, we keep this as a conversation. We can't know everything because there's so much to learn and know in our integrated CAM, but the exciting part is that there's this community that we can count on and talk with and learn from to help us get those tips and tricks just when we need them as we're working in the interface. So I'm going to minimize this. In the meantime, before we jump in, I just want to see if there's any questions from you guys, or if there's anything you guys like to add in at this point. It looks like you guys are, yeah, we're going to talk about Lenny, we're going to talk about SolidWorks shortcuts as well. So we're going to get into those steps for all three interfaces as we start. So again, anytime you guys might have some questions, please ask. I know we have Angelo and CJ online with us right now who are checking some of those questions, and they'll chime in and we'll get that conversation going. All right, guys, so let's get started. I'm going to walk through a couple of those tips and tricks. So let me minimize out of my presentation here. I want to shrink it up a little bit. And so I want to talk about the keyboard tips and tricks first. Let me minimize this as well. So first, I want to talk about the keyboard shortcuts inside of HSM work. So let's take a look at that really quick. So I compiled them here. And also, guys, in your GoToWebinar, if you look in the panel, there's a place called Handouts. If you look in the Handouts, I made a PDF of this presentation. So you'll have that PDF that has all of these shortcuts and all of the stuff we're going to talk about today. So there's even links that you can click when we get into expressions, and we'll talk about those as well. So in the GoToWebinar, for those of you who had joined, we're able to get that PDF handout of the presentation. Okay, so first to start off, we have some keyboard shortcuts. If I use the alternate key, if I hold alternate, I move up and down while I'm on top of a toolpath like this face toolpath. I can easily move it up and down throughout my setup here. So you can easily move a toolpath. You can move a series of toolpaths. If you hit shift, I can move those two toolpaths and move them, whoop, or I can change my screen. I can move them in and out and up and down wherever I want them inside of the setup here. So that's Alt, up and down arrows. We also have Control C. Now you probably know Control C is a copy and Control V in most softwares on Windows. And so we can grab this drilling toolpath. You can use it inside of HSM Works as well. So if you did a Control C and a Control V, you'll see it pasted this, copied and pasted this drilling operation on the bottom here. Now, if I don't want that, I don't have the chance to be able to do undo right now because inside of SolidWorks, our CAM doesn't have the functionality to be able to link to the undo inside of SolidWorks. So to get rid of that toolpath, I just have to select it and hit the delete key. And then it'll ask me, and then I can get rid of it. I also have the ability to select all. So if I select the toolpath and if I hit Control A, it'll select all the toolpaths. Okay? If I go on top of a setup, like this setup, and I hit Control A, it grabs all the setups. So if you have multiple setups that you're trying to post at the same time, you can simply just grab one, hit Alt A, and then you can post them all at the same time. Just get on the post, and you'll grab them all. So that's a little handy tip just to know that in HSM Works, if you grab the setup, it'll grab all the setups. If you grab a toolpath, it'll grab all the toolpaths. In this case, I hit Control A, and now if I want to see an overall machining time it's going to take for all those toolpaths, I can hit Control T. It'll bring up the machining time function. I can plug in my feed scale. I can plug in the rapid feed rate. I can also plug in the tool change time. It'll give me a really close machining time that I'm expecting to see so that at least I can do some quoting or I can get an expectation of what it's going to take for the tool time for all those toolpaths. So that was Control T. If you hit Escape, it'll exit out of that function, and then I can click down here in the browser, and now I'm able to continue my selection. So Escape will bring you out of any selection or out of any dialog. So the Control D, if I wanted to duplicate a setup, if I highlight Setup 2 and I hit Control D, it'll duplicate that setup. Now I have a duplicate of Setup 2 in, now it's called Setup 3. I just copied it by hitting Control D. It grabbed the setup as well as all of the toolpaths underneath, all the operations. It even copied the setup information itself so it knows the part that we're working on. Now if I wanted to use this setup really quick, I want to apply all those toolpaths to another part, all I have to do is right click, edit that setup, and now I can just simply select the new model. Now it would be silly to do this, but I can select that model and hit the green check. It'll apply all those toolpaths to that model. So if you're using 3D toolpaths, it makes it super quick and easy. You just have to regenerate and the 3D toolpaths will now work on that part. So it's a quick way to be able to duplicate a setup of toolpaths to be able to apply it to another part. Now again, I can't undo, so I'm going to have to right click on that setup and then go down to delete, or I can hit the delete key and then delete that setup really quickly. So one thing you'll notice is that as I'm working here, if I go to add a new toolpath, let's say I'm working here, I click Setup 1, and I want to add a new toolpath to the top of this part. So I'm going to go to 3D horizontal, and what it did, it dropped it way down here. Let me exit out for a second. It dropped it down here in Setup 2. The reason is because Setup 2 is the default folder, and I can see that because it's highlighted. It's bold text on Setup 2. Setup 1 is not the default right now, so whenever I add any toolpaths or features, it's going to add it to Setup 2. So what I can do is I can highlight Setup 1 and hit Shift D, and that becomes the setup. Now it's bold. That becomes a setup, so if I start to add a horizontal, you'll see it drop right down in here. That horizontal toolpath is now going to be part of Setup 1. So Shift D will now change the default setup depending on what you have selected. Okay, so another function we use, of course, is if I want to regenerate or if I want to generate any toolpaths, I can hit Control G, and you could do that really quickly. Control G will generate. It's telling me none of them really have to be generated, but I'm going to do it anyway. And Control G, whenever you hit a setup, it'll generate all those toolpaths underneath of it. So these are just handy keyboard shortcuts to make it a little bit quicker for you to move around and work your way around. So down here I see a couple toolpaths in here. By the way, guys, this data set right here, this is a gearbox inside of a chick vise that was updated. All these toolpaths were done, and they're really awesome. And I like this data set was done by CJ and Al, and I think this is going to be my new staple to be able to go in and show off and work with this data set. I just love it. He actually set it up with two chick vices. One's on top of the other, and you just have to flip it over, turn one on, turn one off, and you're able to get all those toolpaths on the other side and make the soft jaws. I love it. It's an awesome way to work. Anyway, so kudos to CJ and Al for putting that together. So, but these toolpaths, now I think I might have messed these up. I know CJ had them all right, but I messed them up. But I want to show you, see how there's a little yellow check on here? So I'm going to hit Shift and grab all those with the yellow check. Now if I hit Control L, it'll bring up the log messages. Now I must have moved something around, and I think I did, because the contour wasn't machined because my lead parameters they would cause a collision in the model. Well, that's good to know, and I can see why that yellow check, that warning is there. It's just giving me a warning. It's not an error. It'll still work. It's just telling me something has changed, or some place in the toolpath isn't machinable, or it's not going to continue through to give me a complete toolpath. So I can see those warnings really quickly by hitting Control L, and I can bring up the log messages. And again, I can hit Escape to turn it off, to get out of there, and I can go back into my toolpath here. So, and later on we're going to go into edit expressions, but I just want to show you, if I right click and I go to edit, if you go into edit an expression, I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit. Like if I look at this property, if I right click, there's also a keyboard shortcut for editing an expression, so I can get there really quick. So if I hit F2 while I'm hovering over, or when I select one of my, I actually have a function F2, I'm able to jump right into expression really quickly. So just to give you an idea that that's another keyboard shortcut that you can do when you're editing your toolpaths. All right, and of course Enter will accept any parameter, but that's basically the keyboard shortcuts that we have inside of HSM Works. There may be a few more that I'm not aware of, and so we can keep an eye on our questions panel, and so any of our experts out there who want to give us a little bit more info on those, you can, if I'm missing any, please let me know. And notice on the bottom here I also included the Alt, Shift, and right click in the browser to enter beta mode. This is true, and you can enter beta mode in all three of our interfaces, whether it's HSM Works, Inventor HSM, or Fusion. To do it in Inventor HSM as well as HSM Works, we hit Control Shift and then find a blank area in the data or your browser here. Right click, and you see a function down here where it says Enable Beta Mode. So often our team and our developers will add in functionality that we can try and work with that's being developed, and we can see it ahead of time and see how that functionality will work with us. It's often good functionality, but it's not quite ready to be released in the full version, and you get to see it in the beta mode. You can enable beta mode, and then you can see those different features and functions inside of your toolpaths going forward. And I would also make sure you check the website, our HSM, our Autodesk HSM website, to make sure that what's going on in the latest beta mode, what's in the development mode, and the latest development version that you're working with, to get a good list of what's happening in beta. I just want to show you that's how you would turn it on. If I right click, you can enable safe mode, enable beta mode, and you notice there's a couple more things, like you can open up installation folders, things like this. You can view a lot of more different information inside of this interface, but I would recommend Explorer and see what kind of functionality you can find that you turn on in beta mode. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm just going to make sure I do enable the safe mode. I can also just turn those off, and now I'm out of the beta mode as well. So that's in here. I include just to make sure that you're able to find it, and also disable beta mode so you don't get any unexpected changes in your toolpath, especially if you're working in production. Okay, so that's HSM Works. I'd like to jump on and move on to Inventor HSM just really quick. There's not too much different, but I just want to at least let you know that we do have these keyboard shortcuts inside of Inventor. So if I'm looking in Inventor mode, you don't have the ability to grab it and hit Alt up and down. It doesn't have that functionality inside of Inventor, but you can, of course, copy and paste any of your operations inside of the browser here, just like you can. But one added functionality inside of Inventor is that you do have the ability to undo. So I added a toolpath down here. I just copied that drill, and I don't really need it. I can just go up to undo, and now it will undo. So you have the ability to undo anything that you add, copy and paste and change inside of the Inventor HSM. And you could do this as well inside of Fusion. So I can copy and paste. I can also do the duplicate as well. So if I wanted to duplicate this toolpath, I just hit Control D. This setup. I can hit Control D. It duplicates that setup. Now keep in mind, this setup 2 is still the default because now I have that green check. So it's different than the HSM Works interface where it had a bold text. This one has a blue check to tell me what the default one is. So if I go down here and I hit Shift D while I have setup 2 copy to, I'll hit Shift D. That becomes now the default. And then I can go and make that toolpath. I can make edits and change the duplicate that I did. Now that became the default. And again, I can always undo. It undid me making that default. I undo again, and now it takes away that duplicate that I made. So in HSM, inside of Inventor, we do have the ability to undo, and of course there's other shortcuts work as well. The same thing for Control A. So if I hit Control A, it'll grab all the toolpaths. If I'm on a setup, Control A will grab all the setups. It's the same way inside of Inventor HSM as it is in HSM Works. We do have the ability to do Control S, or Shift S. So if I want to look at this, let's say counterbore and the top, finishing the top, I can do a Shift S, and then I can just go right into Simulate. So it's a quick keyboard shortcut that you can get right into Simulate, and depending on whatever toolpath you highlight, it'll highlight and then simulate those as well. I hit Escape, it takes me out of the simulation again, and in this case, it just crashed my Inventor, which is going to happen, but unfortunately it happens during a webinar, so I'm going to close that out. And I'm probably not going to send the thing. I'm going to bring it back up, but we're going to continue to work inside of Fusion. But you'll see the same functions are happening inside of here, a few less. We actually have the F1 to get help, and we have F2 if you want to rename. Instead of soft click, you can rename your operation. And I'm going to go and bring up Inventor because I'm going to look at it again later, so let me bring Inventor up. But we're going to move on to Fusion while that's loading up. Also, Alt-Shift right-click in the browser is also going to give you beta mode inside of Inventor HSM. So it's the same way, and any of those new functionalities or the new functions that are happening inside of Inventor you're going to be able to see them in the beta mode. So let me go and open up that one. I'm going to open this gearbox, and I'm going to actually minimize this a little bit while I look at Fusion. As soon as that loads up, and there's my SolidWorks. Let's go into Fusion, and so I can show you a little bit of the keyboard shortcuts. There's less keyboard shortcuts today inside of the Fusion interface, but we do have those shortcut keys, those keyboard shortcuts in here as well. And then I'll also take a look at entering beta mode inside of Fusion as well. So for you new users, if you're taking a look at the first time of seeing how to turn on beta mode, we also have that in here as well. You can see some of that functionality that's up and coming. Keep in mind it's sticky. We'll go through that when you turn on beta mode. You have to make sure you turn it off when you're done. So we can do the same thing. We can go into a setup. If I wanted to copy this one, it's a little bit different. Well, the copy and paste isn't, so I'm going to do that real quick. Let's say I want to go down again, and I'll get this drill again, and I'm going to copy, Control-C. Now, I don't have a browser down here to put my cursor in, so if I highlight Setup 2, and I go to Control-V, it'll paste it at the bottom of setup 2. So it's just a little trick that you got to make sure that you hit setup 2 so it knows that's where you want to paste it. It didn't matter what was default as long as I was in that setup when I pasted it there. Now again, we also have the ability to undo inside of Fusion as well. Now, it's a little bit different working with the default folders. We don't have that Shift D here because when you're working with a default, you have this little radio button here that you can activate or deactivate that folder. So down here, if I want setup 2 active, or I want that to be default, I click it and the radio button goes here, and then this one goes, it's not active right now. It's not the default. So you have those little radio buttons to switch between your defaults. So there's no keyboard function to be able to switch between those. Okay, and of course Control G, if I highlight this setup and I hit Control G, that will generate everything underneath of it. And so it'll regenerate all those toolpaths, which it should. Let's try it here. I'll hold this setup, Control G, yes, yes, I don't want to hit no, yes, I want to regenerate those toolpaths, and it would regenerate them. It's probably off the screen here so you can't see them, but there it is, 61%. Okay, and another thing here is like the Shift S. We did Shift S in Inventor, which brought us to simulation. Here we have a Shift S. If we did it here, it'll bring us into our scripts and add-ins. So if you have any scripts that you're working with for functionality inside of Fusion or even CAM functionality, you can run those scripts by hitting Shift S. So it works differently. I just want to show you that it's different inside of Fusion than it would be inside of Inventor. Also the S key. We're going to talk about this in a little bit, but if I'm in the graphics view here and I hit the S key, it brings up the CAM toolbox. And I'm going to jump into this. Actually, this is probably a good place to get into that. I was going to save this for later, but while we're here, I just want to show you that I hit the S key. No matter where I am, I can hit the S key and I can search for functionality. So if I want to do an adaptive, you can see as soon as I start typing adaptive, it'll jump me to functions that make sense. So I can quickly do an adaptive clearing just by typing it in there, and it brings me to that function. Now, I can also do this. I like to be able to right-click or even hit the S key and go right to a function that I can do. Instead of a pattern, I have a face, I can do these things. Even a setup sheet, that's helpful. Simulate really quickly in a new pattern. Now, if I wanted to do something like this, let's say I want to post right from that box as well. Now, if I hover down here, you see that little arrow. I can click that arrow and it puts it on the quick toolbox. So now I have this CAM toolbox that has the post-process on it. So now if I hit the S key, I can just go right to post-process, and I can post-process whatever I had highlighted. We'll talk about this dumper later. But I can quickly get to post-process just by simply hitting the S key, post. So you can add any function you want to that CAM toolbox that you search for. And you can add it in, and it's a really quick, easy way to work to get there. We'll talk about more of those functions in a little bit. So that's the keyboard shortcuts. We also have the ability to enter beta mode. So I'm going to go down into my text commands. If you don't have that on, you can turn it on by going down to View, go down to Text Commands, or here's some more keyboard shortcuts. Now this isn't just for CAM. This is for Fusion overall. And we do have links that you can find all those shortcuts for Fusion itself. But here I can turn on that text command by Control-Alt-C will bring up text commands. I can expand this up. And then what I started to do earlier is I started to type the command cam.beta mode and then a space /on, the word on. And then enter, and you turn beta mode on, and you can see what's happening inside of CAM. Now that we're in beta mode, we now can see additional functionality that's happening in beta in the CAM environment. So, and I'm not going to jump into too much of that right now because that's for a future webinar. But right now, I just want to let you know that's how you would do it. But just make sure that after you start it and you're getting out of that and you're working on production stuff, make sure you put in CAM beta mode /off to turn it off because it can be sticky. All right, so that's a text command. That's another tip for you to be able to get in to see additional functionality that's happening. Of course, outside of the previews that we see from the overall Fusion team. So hopefully that's helpful for you. You're able to see those, the beta mode, and again, we also have it in the other versions of our integrated CAM for SolidWorks, HSM Works, and Inventor HSM. Cool. So that's been the keyboard shortcuts. Again, we're going to have it in one little handy document. There may be some other ones out there. You may do a search and find out, because I know the Fusion team and the CAM team are working daily to add some functionality, and there's adding new keyboard shortcuts all the time. And that's one of the great things about Fusion, that it's evolving, and we're all part of it, and we're seeing it evolve live. And every few weeks we get an update and brand new functionality, and we can always go in and see what's happening by going down to looking at the future of the product. Here it is, the product roadmap. You can always check out the product roadmap and see what's happening and know when certain features are being added, things from my idea station, where they're at on the milestones, and you can always find out what that roadmap looks like for the future of Fusion and CAM. So I highly recommend going there as well. But as you see those functions, you can see what's being added as far as beta is concerned, and you can always see those functions in beta mode this way. Okay, so I'm going to move on to another quick subject, expressions. So I know a lot of our power users and our elite users out there are so used to using expressions and working with them and using them to make their productivity super increased by working with a lot of those parameters. So I'm going to walk through the different interfaces on working with those parameters and working with expressions. So if I bring up HSM Works, if I want to look at the expressions inside of this rough, this 3D adaptive, and if I go to Edit, and I'm going to go into the Passes tab, and each of these have an expression that we can work with. In fact, every field that you see here, you can always right-click on that field, and you see here Edit Expression. We looked at it earlier where we can hit F2. So I can click that expression, and right here it's showing me, well, this is actually hard-coded in there, but I can easily add an expression in here. So I can do something like tool diameter, or I can put in tool height, tool length. Actually, this is the optimal load, so I probably would put the tool diameter. But just to show you real quick, I can always get back to the default version or the default parameter that was used inside of that expression. If I right-click, I can say reset to built-in default. We're going to talk a little bit more about those defaults, but if I say reset to built-in default, and now if I right-click and look at that expression, it gives me the parameter, tool diameter, multiplied by a factor. And that's going to be the optimal load as the tool is engaged with the material, and you're getting that constant load on the material engagement, or constant radial engagement. This is how much, this is what's driving that value. So these parameters, you can always use different parameters from different values, not only from the tool library, but also from other places and other equations, or shall I say other expressions and variables from different parameters. Now, the question comes up is, well, how do I know that? Where do I get that tool diameter from to plug in here? So one tip is, if you hold the Shift key on your keyboard and then you hover over any of these data fields, it'll change over. Now the help is now showing you what the parameter name and the current expression is inside of there. Any of these fields we hover over, we can see the parameter name and, again, the expression. So you can do it this way, maximum step down, and we can use any of those parameters to be able to drive our toolpath. You can drive your variable inside of the expression to be able to get exactly what you're looking for. Down here, stock to leave. So that's...
Just as a quick tip there, Wayne, when people are wondering how to write them, those are JavaScript-based expressions if you're looking for the kind of programming language that's used.
Awesome. Thanks, Al. So you can get more information on JavaScript, of course, and find out exactly how those operations work and what operands will work in the syntax for JavaScript. So thanks, Al. It's good, definitely good to know what's driving that. And so another question came up as to where can I find that list of those parameters? Now, we are in HSM Works, and when you're in HSM Works, you do have, and I remember Al showed me this one, you do have the ability to right-click in any blank space inside of the Passes tab, and up here it says Copy Parameters as Text. So if you click this, it'll copy those parameters, and now if you open up a Word doc, or let's say we create a new text document, let me go and create a new, I'm just going to do a quick text document or rich text, there we go, text document, which right now I can't get to, it's on my desktop. Let me minimize this because I think it put it back there somewhere. Hang on a second. I'm trying to be quick. So now if I open up this text document right here, and now if I paste, it now put in the list of parameters right out of HSM Works. So that was the functionality inside of the right-click menu inside of HSM Works. Now, that functionality isn't in Inventor HSM today, and it's not in Fusion directly. So there's a couple different ways that we can get them out by using the dump post, but this is not as clean as a list. One neat place I just wanted to point out too, it's a neater interface that Rob Lockwood, he's now Rob Awesome Lockwood, as you see him in our Instagram pages there. I'm going to hit Control click. Rob did an awesome job of creating a list, a nice list inside of our forum. So go to our forum. This is our CAM forum in Fusion 360, and he was able to put that into a nice list where you can see a great example of each of those different parameters. And this is a good list to find those parameters for HSM Works that you can apply to some of your expressions. So thanks, Rob, for putting that together. That's a really good list. I think he did it like a month ago. So that's a really helpful list. Also check out Matt Nichols' Corner too. Matt keeps his blog up to date. As you can see, he also added, well, it's a little out of date, but I know he's going to update it soon. He also keeps us some parameters and also how to use them. So check out his blog site, and he'll keep you posted on some good ways to work with parameters and how to use them as variables. Okay, and another way I had mentioned, also for Fusion 360, if you go to our Autodesk Knowledge Network, and I'm going to bring this up, hit Control, there's also the expressions list in here in our Autodesk Fusion 360 CAM expression variables. You can also find them in here that apply to Fusion 360. So again, there's some places that you can find them, and I did supply these links in the PDF that you can click on. So if you download the PDF, that's attached to, or it's in the Documents folder inside of our GoToWebinar today, you can also get those links as well. Now another way to get to it is if you're working with your toolpaths, and if I want to grab this setup too, by selecting it, I'm going to grab all those toolpaths underneath, and I want to find all the parameters that are driving these toolpaths in here. I can do a post. So if I right-click, I can go down to Post Process, or I can also go up to Post Process, and I'm going to use this Dump CPS. It's a post that comes with the software. The Dump CPS is the dumper. I'm going to say Post Out, and I'm just going to save it as that name. And this is actually using our older edit, but when you do this in Fusion, you can also see it in the new editor. But it does give us a list of those parameters. It's not as clean. It doesn't give us the description, but you can at least find out what the parameter name is that's driving those values in your toolpaths. And you can always use that. Like I would use tool flute length. I would right-click and copy that because I know I'm going to use that later on. So I know that's the parameter name to grab the flute length off of my tool library. And you can scroll through here and see all the different parameter names that you can use to drive your expressions.
It should probably point out it is case sensitive, so you'll find some parameters that the first word is lowercase and then the second word is got an uppercase letter. So just keep in mind that these parameter names are case sensitive. Like you see diameter offset there, the capital O is important in that parameter name. That's
definitely a good point, because you might see your expression and you're getting back an error message saying that they can't evaluate that expression. It just may simply be the fact that you have a lowercase o. So keep that in mind. That's definitely a good point, Al. Thanks. Okay, and then you can learn a lot more about what's going on with those parameters, and you can learn more about how to use them and work with them from our Autodesk Knowledge Network. But that's some ways that you can get in to see those parameters and to work with them. All right, so that's our variables and our parameters. Let me jump down here real quick. So again, thanks Rob, thanks Nick, thanks Matt, and Al and the team for giving a lot of our. Oh, also make sure that you can check the site in JavaScript on knowing how to apply those parameters and what syntax works and what doesn't. Okay, setting defaults, another place where we get a lot of questions over time, and we did a few of our tech tips, our quick tips on this. It's a good thing to mention here in this webinar, is how do you set your defaults and where do you find them? So I'm going to actually jump over to our Fusion for this one real quick, just to show you, and then I'm going to come back to SolidWorks. So if I was going to work on defaults, let's say this 3D adaptive, I'm going to go to Edit, and in the Passes tab, I want to change this, this optimal load, right? So if I right-click and I edit that expression, and I want to make that the 40, factor of 40% there, I'm going to say, okay, recalculates quickly, and now I want to set that as a default. I want that to be always the same equation at 40. So I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to say, make default. And now I was overriding that original default. Now every time I do an adaptive, 3D adaptive, it's always going to have that same expression all the time. So I wrote that to a default. And what I'd like to do is, in a few minutes, I'm going to show you where it saves that to. But in here, for this default, I like that default. I want to save it. And if I go back here to geometry, I just want to show you this. If I always set, if this is always off, and I always forget, and I want to set rest machining, so I always want rest machining on from the setup stock with this adjustment offset. You don't have the ability to right-click in this field. You do here. You can set this as default, but I can't always turn that checkbox on in default. So here's how you would do that. So I'm going to say OK. Right now it's checked on. I'll leave it off the way I want it. And the one way we can set that default is if you right-click and go to Compare and Edit. And we'll take a closer look at what Compare and Edit can do. But I would go into this interface as a tip. And I always want that rest machining on. So I'm going to filter. I'm going to look for rest machining. And over here I said...
Can I point something out here because we just added it?
Yeah.
You notice click down the search box to start typing it?
Yep.
That's the default focus area now. So if you open Compare and Edit and just start typing, it'll default to typing in the search box.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. I didn't even have to click it.
You didn't even have to click it. That's a neat little thing that we just got added.
Oh, that's awesome, because that makes total sense, because that's really the first place I would want to go is just to filter down and search. So awesome. That's an awesome added function. Very cool. So here, if I go and do, there's my rest machining, I can set it to no, but I always want it to be yes. I change it to yes, and now if I right-click on the field, I can now set that to default. I can make that now the default for that operation. So now not only am I able to set the checkboxes, I can also set the pull downs as well. So this is a pull down from previous, from file, from setup stock. I can always right click and I can set that and make that a default as well. So not only are you able to set the values and the expressions to your defaults, you can also make this a default as well by using Compare and Edit. And this is a very powerful tool, especially if you want to compare multiple toolpaths. So I'm going to hold Shift and grab a bunch of these toolpaths, right-click, Compare and Edit, and now I can compare the values across the board. And a neat functionality down here is that I can look at all the ones that are, say, like multi-edit, right? And I can see the ones that have the different ways to edit them. I can also change it to those that are editable. Of course, it filters on some of them that are not. And then I can look at ones that are different or any of that I've modified. So it's a nice way that you can filter down even more. If I look at the multi-edits, that means they're across the board where I'm going to change them. I can look at ones that are different, so I can see which toolpaths have different entries. So it's another quick way that you can you can navigate through compare and edit. But the important part about it is if I want to set many values at the same time, so my tool orientation's all set to no. I have my tolerance set differently for different toolpaths. If I want them all the same tolerance, I can right-click over here, and where it says Edit All, I can change them all, and I can set that tolerance that they're all the same. Right? I can easily set them to be, let's say, 4th thou. Right? If I make them 4th thou, one more, and now I can edit them all so that they're all 4th thou. And then I can save that as for all those toolpaths, right-click, and I can make those a default. So,
oh, Wayne, you made that 4/10, not 4th thou. That's okay though. But that's 4/10.
4/10. Thank you, sir.
No problem.
Awesome.
We can't have the machinist screaming at us.
I'm with you. I'm with you. So I can easily set any of those values really quick across the board. So that's one of the powerful things about compare and edit, that you can easily see and set all of your parameters and all your settings really quickly and make your defaults. So another question that would come up often is, I made all my defaults. I'm like the lead machinist, I'm the lead guy programming, and I have 4 guys who are learning, and I want to make sure that they're using the same defaults that I am. How do I find those? How do I put them on their computer, and how do I share them? So it's not an easy place, but just to let you know, I added some of those locations here. For HSM Works, what I found in L, if I'm wrong, I think the only place you can find them is in the registry, where it saves those defaults for HSM Works.
Yes.
Okay. And
it's in the registry key, but you can export that registry key if, for example, you're wanting to share your defaults with somebody else. You can export that registry key.
So if you're using HSM Works, you can do that in regedit. I don't recommend going here very much. In fact, I don't recommend really going here, but if you do, this is where you would find it under software, your HKey current user, under software, and then go down to HSM Works, and inside of HSM Works is defaults. And then as Al had said, you can right-click this and you can export your defaults. And then you can bring them in. After you're exporting them, you can bring them into another computer and import them into your HSM Works on that computer in the registry, and now you've shared your defaults. Again, please be very careful if you're ever going to work in the system registry. For Inventor, this is a location here, and I'm going to browse with you to get there. So if you're using Inventor HSM and you want to find those default files, they're XML files, I'm going to go to my C, actually down here to my local C. I'm going to go to Users, My User, of course go to Your User, in the App Data, Roaming, Autodesk, and down here in Inventor HSM, you can find the defaults folder, and inside of here is all the defaults that you set. For my adaptive, that's a 3D, 2D adaptive, all those defaults that I set, I can find them here, and I can share them on my other computer, or I can share them with my team. If you're using Fusion, you can find them in the same place, under Autodesk, under the Roaming Autodesk. Down here we have this Neutron Platform folder. If you open this up, and under Options, there's not separate XMLs, they're all under end machine specific options. So if I was to edit this, and let's say we did a quick, I'm going to go Control F and do a quick find for adaptive. Find next. So I can see I have, these are my settings for adaptive, and it looks familiar. You can see there's the parameter right there. And it's setting that parameter with that value. So this is where you'll find your defaults across the board for all the different toolpaths inside of this folder here in this file, and machine specific options. And you can copy this over to another machine and it'll bring your defaults with you. So I hope that's been helpful. I know I kind of did a little bit of deep dive in the folders, but that question comes up very often. So if this is our tips and our tricks to be able to help you be more productive, I wanted to make sure we shared this somewhere, and this is a good forum to do that. And I'm realizing we're getting close to time. I have a few more things to show, but I think what we've gone through, hopefully it has been helpful so far. But I'm going to jump into the next thing, shortcuts and masking menus. One thing in HSM Works that seems to pop up, and I've seen in a few tips, if we're working and you're working in your toolpaths here, and then you do a right-click in the graphics view, it's really just view information. It's really stuff that you'd see in SolidWorks here on the right-click toolbox menu here. What I'd like to do is I'd like to make it functional for CAM. So if I right-click on that menu, and up here I have this bar where I can do a lasso tool and selection tools, I'd like to make some CAM functionality here so I can right-click and maybe even post out or regenerate. If I right-click and I go to Customize, now I have the ability to customize that flyout bar, right-click bar. I can add 2D milling toolpaths, 3D milling toolpaths, but if I go down to HSM Works, and now I can do my generate toolpath, I could just drag it and put it on here. If I want to do simulate, I can just grab it, put it on here. I kind of have to drag it over there. Let's say we want to do stock simulation too. I just drag it, put it on here. Sometimes you got to move it around a little bit. And maybe you want to post. A quick way to get to the post menu, right, from your right-click menu. And I'll say OK. And now if I highlight this toolpath, I can right-click, go right up, and I can simulate. I can generate it, simulate it really quickly. Again, I can hit Escape, right-click, go to Post It Out. So it's adding an enhancement to make it a little bit quicker and easier for you. So some of you who may be new to using HSM Works might not know that you're able to do that and customize those right-click menus even in the CAM workspace to be able to do that. So hopefully that's helpful for you. You can do a similar thing in Inventor. As well as HSM, but Inventor's a little bit different. You have some tools in here in the right-click menu. Not only when you're right-clicking over top of a toolpath, if you right-click in the graphics view, you have some functions down here. You can always get to your normal functions that you work with inside of and you right-click when you're working with toolpaths. You also have the ability to right-click and do gesture movements. You can clear a toolpath, post-process, simulate, generate, show log, do a setup sheet really quickly just by doing a gesture. So if I want to simulate, I just click and drag down like this and it'll simulate. Or if I'm going to 7 o'clock here, I just right-click, go to 7 o'clock, and I can post-process. So really quick right-click menu, and you can set it so you can remember. Do a quick setup sheet, just right-click, pull down, and I can do a setup sheet really quickly. So you do have that functionality, and it's similar to what if you work with Fusion. We do have that right-click and gesture movement that rubber bands around that you can use, and of course you can always get to any of these functions. And if you're hovering over a setup, right-click, you can do, of course, a new operation, manual, NC, any of those things that you're used to. In Fusion, one part that I really like about not only the right-click menu, but of course you right-click in the graphics view, you can always get to do any of the functions that you can normally do on the ribbon bar. One thing I really love about working in here is the S menu. So clicking the S menu, I kind of gave you a little bit of a preview of this earlier, but clicking the S is the search menu, but it's also your toolbox, where you could search for functions if I wanted to do, well, I see setup sheets already there, but if I wanted to post, or let's say I want to put simulate, it's already there. But if I want to look for a function, let's say I do adaptive a lot. Things like this, if I can spell it. If I do like a 2D adaptive or 3D adaptive clearing a lot, I can also put that onto that same bar. Even functions that you wouldn't even find that you normally would work with in here, you can also add into the CAM toolbox. And again, now if I hit the S key, I can just quickly go through and make some toolpaths here as well. So some of that right-click menu functionality that you don't have to hover over the browser, it's also helpful, and you can customize it as well. Cool. All right, I don't know if there's any questions there. I was going to get into toolpath templates, but I'm realizing it's at the top of the hour. But so far, hopefully what we've shown has been helpful for you guys. If you guys have any questions, or if you want to add to what we have so far, please feel free.
I think if we want to do it again as we have in past webinars, CJ's got a little peek into what we're working on. So once we wrap this up, CJ can pop on for a minute or two and show you what's coming.
Awesome. Sounds great. And we're going to keep those tooltips coming. We're going to build a lot more. What's coming in the software, looking more at like things like sheet metal and ways that we work through sheet metal and machining. And also, we're going to do another webinar on this series. I think next week we're going to have a guest speaker who's going to walk us through some sheet metal and fabrication, and then we're going to have Matt Nichols, who's going to join us and do a deep dive into API programming. So it's going to be fun, and we're going to do another set of the series of tips and tricks and the essential series for you guys in the very near future. And so Al and CJ had mentioned they have some sneak previews, so let's jump over to that. It would be awesome to see what's happening in the future of CAM. And so guys, I'm going to bring it over to you. I'm going to stop recording. Everybody, thanks for joining us today. Hopefully these tips have been helpful for you, and cool, and we'll see you guys next week. So I'm going to stop.